Great, George. I'm now delighted to be joined online, on air, by George St. Pierre, a Canadian professional mixed martial artist, one of the greatest fighters in mixed martial arts MMA history. George St. Pierre, a 3-time former UFC welter champion, a 2-division champion in Ultimate Fighting Championships, UFC having won the titles in welterweight and the middleweight divisions. Some of the others accomplishments: 2008, 2009, 2010, named Canadian Athlete of the Year. But George, if I just want to start first of all, the mixed martial arts industry, the sport industry, what enticed you as a kid growing up to get involved in that? Was there any other sort of sports that took your interest or passion, or what age did mixed martial arts become an important part of your life?
Well, growing up in Canada, the main sport is ice hockey. That's our national sport. So every kid play hockey. Like in Ireland, I suppose every kid play football.
Yeah.
So in Canada, it's hockey. So I'm born basically with a hockey stick in my hand. However, I've always been a fan of Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, Steven Seagal. And I think that's for this particular reason that I always wanted to be a martial artist. So, and my dad is a black belt in karate, and that's how it all started for me.
Yeah, and George, one of the important things when I look back and I did my research into your early life growing up, it said that in your childhood you took up karate at the age of 7 to defend yourself from a school bully. And was that the initial first experience that you had of karate, being able to defend yourself?
Yeah, I was victim of bullying at school. I was in a school where it was a very bad school, and unfortunately, I don't have older brother or older cousin to defend myself. So I was there by myself, and I was the victim of bullying. And I got there were a time that I was getting beat up pretty much every week at school. Wow. So I also start martial art to defend myself. Things change for me and got better because of martial art, not because I beat up all the bullies, because martial art taught me to gain confidence in myself, to see myself to make myself more as a confident man. And I wish it would have been more like a Hollywood movie, and I would beat all my bullied, but it did not happen like that for me. I stopped being a victim because I start acting like a different person, like a person that has confidence. And by doing so, it pushed away a little bit the bully, because bully, they always go after kids that lack confidence. Mm. And by doing that, changing my image from the inside out, it made me it didn't make me a victim anymore.
But when you turned your teenage years, not only did your passion for karate grow, but your passion for other mixed martial arts sports. At 16, you took up wrestling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and boxing. So you were beginning to form a love for all the elements of mixed martial arts from an early age. And did it become addictive to you, like a drug? Were you fueled on that sort of adrenaline? Did you get a rush out of it?
So for me, when I switched to mixed martial art, it's because when I first saw Royce Gracie, I didn't know what was mixed martial art at the time until my friend rented a videotape, VHS. And I saw Royce Gracie winning the UFC fighting championship. And I remember he was smaller than most of the other competitor. And he didn't look as intimidating as the other guy. He was kind of skinny, and he didn't have that much muscle, but he beat everybody. He won the whole tournament. And seeing Royce Gracie winning the whole tournament and beating all his opponents with a weapon that nobody knew at that time, which was the ground fighting, the art of jiu-jitsu, it really inspired me, because I was seeing him as I was growing up at school and getting bullied by the older and bigger kids. So it really get me right away. When I first saw Royce Gracie, I knew right away that's what I wanted to do for a living, and it gave me a rush. It gave me a way of life, and then I knew what I wanted to do precisely at that moment.
Yeah, and I suppose, George, you were training away, you were learning your craft, but also at that time you were trying to make a living and support your school fees as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, you worked as a bouncer in a Montreal nightclub, you worked as a garbage man during that time to pay your school fees. So you gained a certain sense of humility and a working ethic from an early stage of your life. Not only that probably disciplined you and make you more determined to succeed.
Yeah, people, they look at me now, they see I have a very good life, and I'm very happy, I'm very healthy, it's more important, and I'm wealthy, but it's not always been like that. My family, I'm from a middle class family, and I had to work very hard. Nobody gave it to me. So it was a time that I was broke, and even I remember I'm from Montreal, and New York is like 7 hour away drive. So I had to learn the skills of jiu-jitsu. The best school for training are in New York City with Renzo Gracie. So I remember I was broke. I didn't even know if my car would make the trip because it was all kinds of problem on my car. And I couldn't speak English at the time, so I had to take my car, drive to New York. But these were risks that I was willing to take, and I was obsessed about becoming the best in the world. And I think in life, if you want something, you need to become obsessed. I was willing to put more into it, to risk more in order to obtain what I wanted. And I think that's one of the big part of my success, because I never take no for an answer. If one door was open, I was kicking another door to get in through. I was always to try to go forward no matter what was the obstacle.
Yeah, and George, you turned pro at 21, and during that time you were training Muay Thai as well, and you came under the guidance of Firas Abbey and Jonathan Chainsburg, people who have been dear friends for you throughout the decades. And what sort of guidance or sort of skills or craft did you hone from them that developed, that made you the fighter that you are today?
Well, there's I've met all my trainer that I have in different occasions.
Yeah.
Firas Habib at first was my training partner.
Okay.
At first, he was a training partner of all of us. He was not the coach, but Firas, as a training partner, always been the most intellectual of all of us. He always been the guy that when we want to know something, we rely on him to ask him, hey, Firas, what can we do? What can we do instead of this? And you always have the best answer. You always been the most thinkers or most intellectual of all my training partners. So at one point he became my coach. I asked him to become my coach because of that reason. Then I also met John Danaher. I met him even at the time that I couldn't even speak English. Yeah. So I was learning from him in his class, and I remember the first time I fought BJ Penn. That's how we got together, and he coached me for my fight, my first fight with BJ Penn, because BJ Penn main weapon was jiu-jitsu. Yep. And he was a world champion in jiu-jitsu, so I needed to train with the best in jiu-jitsu and learn that skill. However, the problem is that I couldn't speak English. So it was a big bridge to between John and I, but we learned how to communicate by body language signs in terms of the art of jiu-jitsu. That's how I learned from him at first. Yeah, and then these were my two main coaches.
Yeah, and George, you spoke there recently. I saw an interview where you spoke about sometimes in getting in preparation for fights that you sort of get nervous and you sort of get a sort of stress and anxiety. Maybe something that bear back when we were talking to George Foreman. He mentioned the same sort of things, and he mentioned particularly about his debut. And I'm just asking you, George St. Pierre, what was it like for your debut at UFC 46 against Carol Parasan? Well, that build up for that fight particular, was that probably the most nervous you've ever been? It was your first fight in UFC. You're young, you're hardy, you want to make an impact, you want to make a name for yourself early on, you want to grab attention for yourself, but there's also that sort of danger element that if things go wrong, the career mightn't take off at all.
Well, the fear of failure, the nervousness never goes away. It even gets worse because every moment, every event gets bigger and bigger as you're successful. So you have more and more pressure every time. It adds to it. However, the thing that changes, you learn how to deal with it a little bit. I remember when I was young, I thought that it would go away at one point and I would get used to it. You never get used to it. The pressure is unbearable. The fear of failure, it's crazy. It's unbearable. It's very hard to deal with. Fear is like fire. Castamodo used to say that. Mike Tyson's coach. He's like, fear is like fire. He can be your friend. He can help you cook your food, but he can be also your worst enemy. He can also burn you.
Yeah.
And I always try to use fear as an ally. I'm at my best when I'm fighting and I'm afraid. When I know that I'm on the edge, I have no room for failure. That's when I am at my base. That's when I feel that I'm gonna perform at my best. It is an incredibly uncomfortable feeling, but that's what it takes for me to perform at my best, because what I do is not a game. We can say I play football, I play baseball, I play basketball, but you cannot say I play fighting. And every time you step into the ring, into the octagon, you're willing to risk your life. It's bad thing can happen out there. So I need that feeling of insecurity to make me perform well. And I realize over the year that if I don't have that feeling of insecurity anymore, it's because I don't care or because maybe I'm crazy. And I know if I don't have it, I won't perform as good, and it will be time for me to retire and to give up on the sport, because it will be dangerous. I won't have the right mindset to get into that sport if I don't have that.
Yeah, and George's, for the amount of successes and achievements that you've had throughout your career, the first major step or crowning a moment opportunity that came about for your career actually ended in disappointment. You lost your first title match to Matt Hughes at UFC 50, and I suppose by an armbar. And I suppose, George, you went on to get so many achievements, but that initial sort of reaction, and did it make you more hungry, more greedy, that sort of determination? Did it drive you, that defeat, or what were your memories? Or did you sort of suffer a bit from that defeat for a while? Was it hard to take?
You talk about the loss of Matt Hughes. I have two losses in my career, and in my professional career, I have two losses. However, in my entire, if you count all the, in amateur, all the competition that I've made since I'm a kid, I have a lot more than two losses. When I was a kid, I used to compete. I won some, I lose some. And of course, I'm a perfectionist. I don't like to lose. I hate to lose. However, I'm willing, it's a risk that I'm willing to take. And even though I hate to lose, and if I could, I would erase all my losses and have a perfect record, all my life, not only in professional career, and all my martial art life, but it's impossible. However, when you lose, you can use it in two ways, in a positive way and negative ways. if you lose and you know why you lose, and you know that the mistake that you have made and the reason why you lose, and you next time you try to never ever repeat the same mistake that you've done again.
Now joined back on the line by George St. Pierre. And George, I suppose, looking onto that day, you had significant fights against Frank Trigg at UFC 54, Sean Shirk at UFC 56, and as you mentioned already, BJ Penn at UFC 58. And what are some of your particular memories of those fights and those opponents?
Well, I every fight I'm incredibly nervous. I'm scared because you don't know the outcome. But there is no courage without fear. And I like those feeling of insecurity that drive me to perform at my best. And even though it's incredibly uncomfortable, I know that's what I need to be at my best. So I took those fights. When I fight, I try to not think too much, and I try to not overthinking and let myself go with the flow and trust my instinct, my natural instinct of a fighter that has been built up and programmed over the years, and that's how I perform at my best.
Yeah, and George, one of the particular fights that stood out for me was UFC 74. You took on Josh Kushnick, and the most particular element of this fight that stood out to me, at the time Josh Kushnick was a 4-time wrestling champion. He was one of the most decorated fighters in relation to his wrestling background, but you actually beat him at his own game. You out-wrestled a wrestling sort of champion, and many people would thought, well, you might implement this style or that style against Josh Kushnick, but to actually beat a guy which is predominantly his main element of his sort of fighting as well. What was the preparation for that fight? Was it predominantly on wrestling? Was that the main idea, that I'm going to go out and I'm going to beat this guy at the skill that he values or treasures the most?
I train and I wrestle with some of the best wrestlers, And the thing is, people they don't realize, but mixed martial arts, the setup of mixed martial arts for a takedown, it's not purely wrestling. Once you get the legs, when you get into the leg, I would agree that it's wrestling, but there's a lot of different things to get into account here. There's the strikes and all these things. So I use my karate setup to get in on a takedown. And that's what people don't understand. They try to only see it as a wrestling, but I use my karate as a way to get in the legs. And once I get the leg, now I use my wrestling to finish the takedown. And that's one of my strengths, to close the distance. But I got that from karate.
Yeah, and George, another particular fight that stands out for me was UFC 83 against Matt Sierra in 2008, and this was a sort of defiant sort of moment in sort of your career in relation to cementing your sort of legacy and that element of revenge as well. But it was so dominant, your victory over Matt that time around, and what was that sense of achievement or sense of reward after that fight? It must have been something very special, that feeling of redemption.
That was probably one of the most satisfying victory of my whole career, because it was a revenge. I've lost my first fight against him, and I knew I didn't have any. I couldn't make any mistake for this one, because I would never have another chance of fighting this guy if I would have lost 2 in a row. So, and it was in Montreal, in front all my hometown, in front all my family. So I couldn't make any mistake for that fight, and to win my first UFC title in front of my family in Montreal, it was the first UFC in Montreal. It was a very special moment, and it will stay in my memory for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and George, I suppose in relation to the UFC and the training regimes and getting yourself pre-fight camp and getting yourself into preparation for the fights, the ability to stay at the top of your game in relation to fitness and in health and nutrition and body fat and all that sort of, is that something you've grown accustomed to over your life? And in the lead up to a fight, maybe 2 weeks out for the fight, what would be the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. regiment of George St. Pierre would be? Would it be healthy eating, a lot of sleep, a lot of training, a lot of running? What would the daily sort of lifestyle be for you?
Maybe it might surprise you, but I don't have very much a very extremely rigid robotic lifestyle. I perform at my best if I have fun, if I love what I do, and if I put myself too much in a rigid lifestyle and a diet and all that, I won't have fun and I won't perform as well. So I try to eat as much, like whatever I want. I try to eat healthy when the fight is coming up. I don't cut a lot of weight, so I don't have any issues with that. So I don't really watch what I eat. I eat whatever I want. I try to eat healthy. Of course, a month before the fight, I try to not drink alcohol. In terms of training, I organize my training according to my schedule. I try to sleep my 7 to 8 hour a night, which is hard because you get stressed sometimes because of the fight and all the promotion that's around it. But I don't have a very incredibly rigid, robotic schedule. You know, like I just do what I do, try to enjoy it and have fun. I think the key in life is to have fun. If you do something and you have fun, you'll be good at it. You'll be successful. If you don't have fun, that's when you lose the passion, you lose the fire, and that's what happened to a lot of people, I think, in their field of work. First, they start doing it because it's fun, then the fun became work, and work becomes stress, and stress becomes not fun anymore. And I didn't want that to happen to me.
Yeah, and George, we all know about UFC and the post-match hype and hysteria, and in relation to the guys who love to talk and make scenes and promote and sell sort of fights, and the characters that almost be fit in the WWE, the wrestling world, in relation to these pro-match hysterias. And even in UFC, like you came across Michael Bisping, who would be renowned for that sort of talk or that sort of hype. And even Ireland, we have our own Conor McGregor, who loves to talk for hours upon hours in relation to selling a fight. And what do you make of that yourself, being a fighter yourself who loves to zone in on the craft in the ring? What do you make of all these antics that are in the UFC, and do you take it as part of the business of selling fights, or is something that you don't particularly take much notice to?
Well, if we live in a world of entertainment. When we do, it's entertainment. The fight are promoted on emotion. If everybody would be a nice guy, it would be kind of boring.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people will tune in. Only the purists. Only the people that are the purists. But to attract a bigger audience, you know, they need to involve some emotion in the promotion. And some guys do it very well. You can think about Michael Bisping. Conor McGregor is the best at it that they sell. He's the one that sells the most. And from me, I've never been good at trash talking, so I choose my battle very carefully. I'm good at fighting, and I'm not very good at trash talking. First, also, English is not my first language. So if I get into a war of talking with someone, I probably lose every time, you know, because English is not my first language. And I'm just not good at it. And I just focus on what I'm good at. But like I said, if everybody would be nice and respectful, it would make any story between the two opponent. People need to relate into something in order to tune in. So they need those emotion things to get involved, to tune in. And some fighters are very good at it. Like Conor is incredibly good. He's the best of all time. At doing this, he's able to draw so many people to watch his fight, and I think it's great because what he have done is he's put the sport on a map and on a platform that it never been reached before.
Yeah, and George, after you retained your welterweight championship on December the 13th, 2013 against Johnny Hendricks, having held the record for the most wins in title bouts and second longest combined title streak in UFC history, 2,200 days, defending the title 9 times, you took a time out. You sort of said, right, I needed a break from the industry, maybe. Was that particularly of burnout fatigue? Was that the reason, George, that you needed time to refocus, to get peace, tranquility in your life and regain hunger again for the sport? Was it beginning to feel robustness for you?
Yeah, I was going through maybe a depression. I was carrying a lot of pressure for a very long time. It's very hard to explain because only a few people can relate to this. It's an extremely stressful lifestyle, and I was doing it for a very long time, and I didn't have fun anymore. Plus, on top of that, I know I was competing against guys. Some of the guys was competing, I knew they were like cheating. They were like using performance-enhancing drug, and I was against it. And it was like I felt like nobody did nothing. Everybody, like, most people knew and nobody did nothing, and I felt a little bit betrayed, and that's why I took off. And I came back many years after, and I'm happy that all these issues has been addressed. It's not perfect. It's still not perfect. There's a lot of problems, but it's much better than it was. And you can see there's a lot of champions, a lot of stars that have fallen.
Yeah, and George, 2 other fights that come to my attention was UFC 111 against Dan Hardy, a renowned fighter. Dan Hardy, a tough sort of man, and a real guy that was an awful lot of talk about, and a convincing victory for yourself. And in the second fight, your return fight in November 2017 at UFC 217, where you defeated Michael Bisping to become middleweight champion, and that was unique in fact because you became the only 4th fighter in UFC history to become a multi-champion. So the Dan Hardy fight and the Michael Bisping fight, what are your thoughts and your memories on both of those fights?
Yeah, Dan Hardy was a very he's an amazing he's a very, very tough fighter. I tried to submit him many times, and he always find a way to get out of my submission. He was incredibly good, and he had a very good left hook. So I knew his main weapon was a left hook. So going up against him, I tried to neutralize his strength. I didn't want him to fight where he's the most comfortable. So that's why I brought the fight to the ground and tried to fight him where he's not comfortable. For Michael Bisping, I wanted to come back and do something different. I had 3 major criticizes in my career. One was like I was fighting without, like, the promotion was kind of boring. It was not a lot of emotion involved into fighting because I'm a respectful guy. I don't trash talk. The other one was like I never go up a weight class, to fight a champion in another weight class. And also people say that I never finish fight. I win very often in decision. So I wanted to come back and address these 3 things. So I knew by fighting Michael Bisping, he was a very loud trash talker. So it would make the promotion more interesting. And also, fighting him is a champion in a higher weight class. And I trained myself in a different ways to be more aggressive and more opportunistic. If the occasion of finishing my opponent will come, and I'm happy I was able to address these 3 things in one night. And I didn't want to go back and do something like I've done before, something different.
Yeah, and George St. Pierre on Yes? George St. Pierre on February the 21st, 2019, much to the surprise and shock of most of the world, you announced that you were stepping away this time for UFC for good, and you explained your sort of reasons that you wanted to retire on a high, retire feeling good about yourself, retire not going down the route that so many boxers did, like Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. fighting past their prime, and you wanted to go out and maintain your legacy. But you mentioned that Khabib fight and that Khabib fight not happening for yourself after Khabib fought Conor McGregor. And was that one of the reasons why you left it? You looked around and you didn't see many more opponents apart from Khabib or McGregor that you would like to face?
Well, I thought what I thought the plan was. I thought Khabib would beat Conor McGregor. I foresee it. I thought he would win, and I thought I knew Khabib wanted to fight me, so I thought he would have called me out, and the fan would react, would make a big splash, and the fight will be on. That was the plan. However, it didn't. It did not happen the way I planned it. And I know Khabib wanted to fight me. I know he mentioned it many times. I wanted to fight him. The reason is because he's undefeated. He never lost before. He's like the most scary guy out there right now. He's, for a martial artist, the most exciting thing sometimes is the most scariest thing. Yeah. And it's to fight Khabib. It's to fight a fighter that has an aura of invincibility. And that's why I wanted to come back. I wanted to come back for something that I can win, not only a loss situation. Something that I have a lot to lose, but I have a lot to win as well. And if I would go back and fight another contender, I felt like I have more to lose than to win. So I want to take the risk, but it needs to be worth it in terms of legacy. For me, it's more a question of legacy than money.
Yeah, and George, looking ahead now to the future, the industry you loved, UFC, your time in that has come to an end. What are the main plans or hopes for George St. Pierre going forward? What is left that remains unticked in your own life or your own career that you want to do? Do you want to do more travelling? Do you want to spend more time with your family? Do you want to get back into coaching and help youngsters in the sport that you loved?
Well, you asked me a question that sometimes in life we don't really know what we want. And I don't really know what I want. However, I know what I don't want. And I didn't want, and I don't want to retire too late, to get brain damage, to have problems like a lot of fighters have, and finish broken. When I say broken, it's not necessarily money, because I am very wealthy, but broken physically. Yeah. And that's the most important thing for me. I want to grow up, be healthy, and still be involved in the sport, be able to train. Like right now, I'm in the gym. I'm about to go train, and I'm healthy. I wake up in the morning, I feel great. This has no price. This is more than any money that you can have. That's the most important thing for me is health, family, health, and that's the most important thing.
And George, lastly, as we're coming to the end of the interview now, just two final questions for you. This first question, George, I suppose most people mightn't have asked you this before, but if you take away the UFC industry, who's the most other sports person in the world that you most admire or you follow or you look up to outside of UFC? Who has been a sporting hero of yourself?
There's a lot of people that I admire, and they're not necessarily fighters. There's a lot of guys that I admire. They're great. If you talk about the athletes, there's many athletes that I admire for different reasons. One athlete that I admire was Wayne Gretzky in the sport of ice hockey. One of the reasons why I admire him a lot is probably because his record for, if you take an athlete sport, Wayne Gretzky is probably the athlete that I can say for sure the record will never be broken. The chances are extremely low, because he set up the record so high that I don't think every athlete, never an athlete will be able to beat it. Not that during my living, he's like the Michael Jordan of hockey, and his record, the distance between him and the second best is so far away. And also the way he carries himself, he's a gentleman, he's a great model, and I always try to be like him growing up. So he's one of my idols for sure.
And finally, George St. Pierre, have you ever been to Ireland, or is it your intention ever to come to Ireland? As we know, Ireland is a sort of renowned for its fighting traditions, from famous boxers to famous fighters throughout generations. And have you ever been to Ireland, or is it some place that you wish to come in the near future?
Tired of what do you say? Tired of being compared
Have you ever intentions to visit Ireland in the near future, George St. Pierre?
Yeah. Of course, I would love to. I've never been there. I would love to. I've seen a lot of movies and stuff like that, but I never actually physically been there. So I've been in England many times, but Ireland, I would love to. Yes, I would love to. One day, maybe, hopefully, I'll have a chance.
George St. Pierre, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on the airwaves today as we look back at some of the iconic feats and the iconic legacy you have created in UFC over multiple decades. As we said, a 2-division champion in welterweight, a middle division champion, one of the longest winning streaks of all time, and you will go down in legacy as one of the great UFC fighters of all time. George St. Pierre, an absolute pleasure for me, Jim Conlan, to talk to you today. Take care.
Thank you very much, sir. You take good care. Nice talking to you.